This is Gressenhall Workhouse. My name is Detective Lightfoot, and I have a murder to investigate. Oh, goodness me. If you have accompanied me this far upon the case, you will not need reminding. We are attempting to discover the identity of the murderer of Mr. Richard Barker, chairman of the Board of Guardians of the workhouse. We have met 3 of the suspects and have 4 more to interview. I left Nancy Flowerdew in the laundry and decided to see who was singing on the other side of the wall.
Then stand to the Union forever. 3 cheers for Bold Dutch and his crew.
Oi! Put a sock in it, Plowright! You don't want to get in any more trouble, do you? Fancy another day in the refractory cell? Nah, get back to work!
I saw a man sitting on a bench in the yard, and I asked him what the porter was shouting about.
And he talks about me being lazy and idle. When did Grieve ever do a stroke of work? He's been hanging about all day.
The man introduced himself as William Plowright. I told him I understood he had been in trouble with the Board of Guardians.
They said that I did not keep to the men's ward and wandered the workhouse at night time. Look, it was last week. I found the door left open and I thought I'd go and see my wife. How would you feel to be separated from your family? Even though we're married. When we come through the workhouse doors, the men and women are divided up. Men to one ward, women to another, and children to another. It's not right. It's not Christian. However, families are allowed to see each other for a whole hour after church service on a Sunday.
I inquired what punishment he had been given.
3 days in the refractory cell. The dungeon, as everyone calls it. Locked in there for 8 hours at a time, with little bread and water, and a bucket to use, you know, when you need to go. You can get sent there for breaking any of the rules. There are lots of rules. If you keep on breaking the rules, you can get sent to prison.
Plowright turned his attention to something in his lap. He made short, sharp picking movements with an iron nail. I asked him what he was doing.
I'm picking oakum. It's old ship's rope that holds up the masts of sail ships. We have to pick it apart. Then it's sent back to the coast and used to help keep ships watertight. Pressed into the gaps between the wooden timbers.
I commented that it looked hard work.
You get used to it. We have to pick 1 pound of oakum a day. It's quite difficult work. First, you have to beat the rope with a hammer, soften it, and then pick it with a nail or spike. It's hard on your hands, but any farm worker's used to that. The worst thing is when we have to work inside because the weather is bad. The little bits get into your chest and makes you cough.
I asked him where his hammer was.
I looked for it this morning. I couldn't find it anywhere. Do you know, Detective, only 2 sorts of people pick oakum. One is the inmates of workhouses. The other is prisoners in prison. That tells you everything you need to know about how the rich feel about the poor. As though it's our own fault we're in the workhouse.
So how did he come to be in this workhouse?
I lost my job. Got the sack. A farm worker like me. An agricultural labourer. Lives in a tied cottage. That means my home was owned by my boss. So when I lost my job, I lost my house. And the only place I could go was the workhouse.
Did he know Mr. Barker?
Knew him. I used to work for him. Do you know, I don't think he even recognised me when I stood in front of the Guardians last night.
I left him picking oakum in the men's workyard and made my way towards the chapel where Mrs. Barker was said to be. I passed by the boardroom and saw Nancy Flowerdews there. She was standing, staring intently at something in her hands. I demanded to see what it was.
That's nothing, sir. Nothing at all. Oh, sir, I wasn't trying to steal it. Please, sir, don't send me to the prison. I found it under the table. I was going to tell the master. Honest I was.
She opened her hand. In it lay a golden ring. I found Mrs. Barker in the workhouse chapel and asked her if she had lost her wedding ring.
Oh, thank you, Detective. I must have lost it. It is a size too large, you see, and is always slipping from my finger.
I inquired as to how she was bearing up after the news of her husband's death.
It has been a very great shock to me, Detective, but one endures. My husband was a great servant to his community, selflessly spending many hours with the guardians at meetings of the highest importance, endless troubles with inmates and the staff.
At what time did she arrive at the workhouse yesterday?
I arrived with my husband in our carriage just as the workhouse clock chimed 5, and was met by the master.
Ah, Mrs. Barker, you grace us with your presence. The inmates do so value your weekly visits. Why, they often say to me, Lady Barker, for so they call you, brings light into our lives.
I find the master to be an impossibly weak man, and I can assure you that my husband also had a low opinion of him. To speak frankly, he was not certain that Mr. Fuller was a very good master at all. In fact, he was considering finding a replacement. My husband and I went to the boardroom. He attended to his papers. I remember there was one particular document he seemed especially interested in.
It's, nothing, my dear. Now, be on your way, and make your visits to the inmates. You know they love you so. I have work to do.
The under-matron accompanied me to the infirmary. That is the workhouse hospital, Detective. It brings tears to my eyes, you know. For the most part, they're dear, sweet, old folks who have worked hard all their lives and through little or no fault of their own find themselves spending their twilight years in the workhouse. Truly they may be called the deserving poor. Of course, we ensure they have the best medical equipment, water beds, propelling chairs and so forth, at great cost to the taxpayer. But, I pray you, do not be fooled. Not all of the inmates are so deserving. On returning from the infirmary, I passed the men's workyard and heard a tuneless voice over the walls.
Then stand to the Union forever. 3 cheers for Balderch and his crew.
Singing in the workhouse. Would you believe it? There was something familiar about the voice.
Don't think he'll desert you, no never, if you stick to the Union to blue.
And not just any song, a union song, whatever next. All around Norfolk, the ungrateful farm workers have been joining together into a union. They think that if they demand higher wages together, no farmer can refuse them. My husband is a landowner too, you understand, and we had terrible problems with the labourers on our farm. I regret to say that my husband had to sack a few of the bad seeds and turn them out of house and home. People like these are the undeserving poor. They are poor because they choose to be lazy, idle and immoral. We must be watchful for them at all times.
At this point, I had to interrupt Mrs. Barker, as I feared she would continue until the end of time. Had anything unusual occurred last night?
Unusual, Detective? No, not that I can recall. I went to the laundry and there saw one of the poor women. Nancy Flowerdew, shameful and coarse and rude as usual.
Well now, if that ain't Miss High and Mighty, come to minister to the poor. Now don't you look at me like that, Mrs. Barker. If you want to do something truly good, then why don't you ask your husband why he gave that Lizzie Bacon a job? That certainly ain't 'cause she can cook.
Of course, the undermatron sent her immediately to the unmarried mother's ward. Another example, Detective, of the undeserving poor taking advantage of our charity. And I believe that is all. I left the laundry and went to the boardroom to meet my husband at about 8:15 by the bell. Oh yes, as I arrived, the master was there speaking to my husband.
Mr. Barker, I implore you, I don't know how long I can continue in this way.
The master left as soon as I arrived. I could tell he was most unhappy. My husband said he had other business to attend to, and we bade each other goodbye. For the last time, I regret to say, although I did not know it then. I went home and to bed, only discovering that my husband had not returned home when I awoke this morning to find...
I gave Mrs. Barker my condolences and took my leave. I crossed the courtyard, determined to meet with Grieve, the porter. As I did so, I wondered about Mrs. Barker's wedding ring. Had it fallen from her hand by accident? And Nancy Flowerdew's question about the cook, Elizabeth Bacon. What did she mean by it? And lastly, Mrs. Barker's tears. Were they real?